Now, hello there, and welcome to the Online Prosperity Show, the number one place to discover the stories, strategies, and human experiences behind people who are solving real problems in the world. I'm your host, Prosper Taruvinga, and as you will establish, this show is for people that are looking very successful on the outside, but still feel overwhelmed, stuck, or quietly battling things that nobody sees. And today's conversation is about mental fortitude, identity, and learning how to take control of your life when your mind feels like it's working against you. So if this resonates with you, you definitely are in the right place. So I want to encourage you, if you haven't already, to just make sure you subscribe on whatever platform that you're listening or watching this on, because we bring you conversations like this each and every week. Now, today I've got somebody fascinating joining us. Eric, welcome to the show.
Thanks, Prosper. It's good to be here.
Absolutely. Now, for those that are meeting Eric for the very first time, Eric is a husband, father, airman, leader, and a coach. He's spent 14 years in the Air Force studying leadership, both in theory and in practice. Now, he's been working on multi-million dollar jets and deploying these to undisclosed locations and carrying pressures that not a lot of us will ever get to see in our lifetimes. But what really makes this story powerful is not, the strength that people saw, but it's the battles that he's been fighting that nobody has yet to see. And hopefully we're going to be, unlocking some of those today. And we are also going to be talking about his journey from feeling lost to becoming locked in. And we'll talk about his book and everything else that he has been creating. So Eric's story is one that a lot of people quietly leave. You're probably performing well, you're meeting expectations, showing up for everybody else, while inside something feels off. All right. So if you've ever felt like that, I want you to drop in the comments there. Just simply type, "I've been there," as we go through Eric's story, because this episode is definitely for each and every one of us. Now, Eric, I could go on and talk about things that I'm not even qualified to talk about. Take us back to how it all started. I mean, before the book, before the coaching, who is Eric, and what does life look like for you day to day?
Well, I don't know if I'm qualified to talk about it either, so I'll start there. But I guess life is a great qualifier. So, anyways, yeah, I grew up in Colorado, Loveland, Colorado. I spent 17 years there, and then joined the Air Force when I was 17. I had to get my parents to sign off to say I could join early, because normally you have to be 18. Turned 18 at basic training, turned 19 on my first deployment. And then, I'm a crew chief by trade, so fix F-15s and F-16s and things like that. So kind of a mechanic, I guess, for the airplanes. And I gained rank fairly fast, probably too fast. Definitely wasn't ready for some of the leadership challenges that came my way. That put a lot of pressure on me. So that's kind of where this book came from, and some of the things you've alluded to, just feeling a little overwhelmed at times, right? I think everyone does. But life for me day to day, I've got a wife and a son, and they're my number one priorities. And then work, I work about 10 hours a day. It's still in the Air Force. And then prior to being where I'm at now, which is finally back stateside, I spent 6 years in England. That was my first duty location. And then I spent 7.5 years in Japan. I spent 4 years down in Okinawa, and then 3.5 years up in northern Japan in a place called Aomori.
Oh, absolutely. And thank you so much for opening us up with that. Now, I'd want to say at age 17, I don't think I even knew how to write my own name. Now, what was the inspiration towards you wanting to join or sign up to the army that early?
So when I was, that's actually a really good question. So when I was in middle school, sixth grade, I was bored. I got signed into like gifted and talented classes because like I was uh, pretty good at math and a couple other subjects. And I remember one day I was like, man, I don't want to go seventh grade. I've already done a bunch of the work and everything. And I asked my teacher, I said, hey, how do I skip a grade? And my teacher was like, I don't know. Like, I've never done that for someone before, but we could figure it out. So we went through this journey to figure that out. And I ended up actually like writing an essay and getting a meeting with the school board, and they advanced me straight from sixth grade to eighth grade. And I think that is like a good snapshot of kind of my mentality as a young man was I'm just looking for challenges. And so when I got through school, it wasn't that school wasn't challenging. It was just that I wanted a new challenge.
Mhm.
And something I've actually was never good at all through school was physical things, running, push-ups, sit-ups, things like that. And then one day these army recruiters came and they started talking about, you know, fixing Humvees in combat and just got, I was like, and, you know, running and doing and all these things. And I was like, I'm not good at that. That sounds fun. That sounds like a challenge.
Mhm.
And so I talked to the Army, took some tests with them, and then ultimately decided on joining the Air Force. But that's the why behind why I joined.
Absolutely. And thank you so much for that. There wasn't any sort of role models or people that you aspired to that were also enlisted with the army that you would have seen on your way up?
So my dad was in the Marines. My grandpa was in the Army. My uncle was in the Navy. So no one in the Air Force. But I did grow up around that kind of mentality a little bit. But I don't think that was any of the driving factor behind it. I think the driving factor was part I didn't want to go to college, part I knew that that sounded challenging, and part that I knew that at 18 I wanted to live on my own and be independent. And there wasn't a great path to that end through going to college, racking up debt, and possibly like, you know, working a dead end job or something like that.
Absolutely. And obviously you've had the opportunity to leave and stay abroad in very different places than the places you were brought up. What has that experience also afforded you as the person you are today?
I think travel is so important because as a 17-year-old, turned 18 at basic training. So I was 18 when I got to England. And that's the legal drinking age in England, by the way. So just immediately went into my party phase, right? But getting exposed to different cultures has been probably one of the biggest blessings of being in the military. Spending 6 years around British people. I've got a lot of British friends. My wife's actually British. I met her in England. And then moving to Japan and seeing how Japanese people are, and just hanging out with them at the bars and trying to learn some Japanese and things like that. Um, Experiencing different cultures really helps give you perspective, I guess. And then now I'm back in the States, and honestly, it's culture shock for me because I've been overseas for 14 years and I've been driving on like the left hand side for 14 years, you know, and now I'm driving on the right again, and I still mess it up sometimes.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, yeah, I can only imagine. Yeah, especially when it comes to driving and things of that nature. And obviously, in places like Japan, you would have been in an army base or in, like an Air Force base, but were you also exposed to like the language, the food, the way of life, just the whole Japanese way of being?
Oh yeah. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Um, Actually, what's funny is I started learning Japanese when I was stationed in England. I was in England, and my unit went TDY, we took some jets up to Alaska for a training exercise, and the Japanese were there. And my favorite pastime while we were on that TDY was going to the bar and trying to like find Japanese people to like sit down with and drink with them and try to get them to teach me Japanese. And so I made some really good Japanese friends while I was in Alaska, and then continued to learn the language a bit when I got back. Then I got stationed in Japan and actually ended up stationed at the base, same base as two of my friends that I'd made in Alaska. So two of my Japanese friends worked on the same base that I worked on when I went to Japan.
Absolutely. And obviously, while if you're inscripted in, some sort of military service, the Air Force would be obviously looking after every need that you might have, and you're basically surviving in that sort of phrase. What did you do with yourself? Did you get promoted? Did you keep climbing the ranks? Who did you become?
Yeah, so as an airman, you basically put on the first couple of ranks just through time progression. So as you're in the certain amount of time, and you don't, pretty much you keep your nose clean, don't get in trouble. And then you test for staff sergeant and tech sergeant, which are your first two ranks of non-commissioned officer. And I passed. I've always been a really good test taker, and I'm pretty book smart when it comes to like being able to study and regurgitate information. So I tested and made staff really fast. I think I sewed on staff sergeant around 4 years in. And at staff sergeant, that's your first level of supervisory role. And you start having troops and increased responsibility and things like that. And I think looking back, I definitely wasn't ready when I made it. But I'm glad that I made it when I did, because as part of the transition from being an airman to being an NCO, you go to a school, air leadership school. It's 5 weeks. I teach you about, how to be a supervisor, how to lead. And I had an amazing instructor in that class who really honestly changed my life. He came in and basically threw down a gauntlet and said, I'll give you everything I have for the next 5 weeks. All I ask is that you do the same.
Right.
And over the first 4 years of my career, I think I'd gotten fairly complacent, I guess, and a little bit lazy. But when he came in and said that, it kind of reignited that spark where why did I join the military? For a challenge? Why, I love challenges. You're challenging me. Let's go. And put my head down, studied, applied myself fully for those 5 weeks. And then I graduated top of my class. Out of 84, I was the top graduate. And remember telling myself, like, if that's what I get for applying myself for 5 weeks, why am I not doing this more? Like, what's my excuse for not applying myself all the time? And in that class, I also learned that as a leader, John C. Maxwell's law of the lid, right? You can only grow others as far as you've grown yourself. You can only grow your team, the people around you, as far as you've grown yourself. And I realized I hadn't grown myself very much in those first 4 years. And so now it wasn't just a choice to not grow myself, but I was making that choice for the people that I was going to lead. If I didn't grow myself, I was making a choice for the people that were going to be subordinate to me.
So obviously, from what you're saying, on the surface, everything looked very successful. I mean, you're top of the class and out of 84, but underneath, like you say, you felt like, something was missing or you were drifting. What did that actually feel like? Or what did that manifest as?
So that's happened to me a couple times in my career, and a couple times, I guess, before that. I've gone to a lot of therapy and kind of like worked through some stuff. But what I've come to find out is I think I have really, really high functioning anxiety. And I'm just anxious all the time. But I've learned to let that kind of work for me. So like all that pressure, I'm like, okay, can't fail. And so I apply myself. and I'm able to do really, really, I don't know, have like really good work ethic or get things done and beat deadlines and things like that. But it's a lot of pressure, I guess, when you operate like that. And it burned me out a couple times. And so just experiencing burnout, like I enjoy what I do, but I'm feeling misaligned, right?
Mm.
I'm not feeling like the life I'm living is the life I could live or I'm meant to live. Um, and that creeps in from time to time because for a long time I didn't know what my personal core values were or kind of what my own tenets were. And so when you have that anxiety and that kind of that external pressure, I tell my guys all the time, like, if you don't know what matters to you, someone else will tell you what matters.
Right.
Right.
Mm.
So the Air Force or your supervisor or your wife or your buddy or someone randomly online, you know, someone else has an idea of what's important. And if you've never defined that for yourself, um, then it's easy for you to kind of go with the flow and like, well, I don't really know what's important. And then you look up and it's been 10 years and you haven't done anything that you consider significant or important.
Now, obviously, from what you're saying, the fact that if you don't know what it is that drives you, somebody will give you those sort of instructions. And I'm also thinking, like the military, Air Force, or, dare I say, the Army, you always have somebody, obviously, from what we see in the movies, somebody yelling at you, telling you what to do and everything else. Did that not take you off center in the way that you actually operate, because that would have made you a little bit more anxious, because you might have felt that all this yelling that is happening must signify that I've done something wrong.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah. And I think something else I've struggled with a lot is imposter syndrome.
Mm.
And that one creeps in. I think that one, the military definitely contributes to a little bit, because everything can be going great and you can have a great 2, 3, 4 years, whatever. And then you like drop the ball on one project and someone gets upset. And then you're like, man, I look like a moron. And then that creeps in, that self-doubt starts creeping in. Or there's some situations where you'll get, I don't know, you'll have a boss or someone, not necessarily in the military either, just in life, you'll have someone appointed over you, right, that doesn't understand the value that you bring to a team. They don't understand the X factor, the soft skills, the other things that you're doing. You don't fit into their idea of what I guess whatever your position is, whatever they expect out of that. And that can really that feels terrible, when you're bringing value and you're worth something, but someone else doesn't see it and they happen to be your boss.
Mm, absolutely.
I think that's a tough one. And that one ate at me a lot. And that's actually, I think, what drove me to write the book.
Absolutely. You see, there's a powerful moment that you share in there where you're sitting alone, you're crying, you're just trying to make sense of what is actually happening. Walk us through what was going through your mind at that moment.
So in that moment, I'd been told that I had annually in the military, you do like a medical screener. And I had screened, I'd answered all the questions honestly and everything. And I had screened for PTSD.
Oh.
And they said, hey, man, like, it's not a diagnosis or anything, but you've got some significant scores here. And we want to talk to you because we think you might have PTSD.
Mm.
And I had been going through a lot over that 6-month period leading up to that phone call. And I'd been having nightmares and all kinds of stuff. And that hit me really hard. And then it was really hard for me to wrap my head around too, as I started going through the process, because I never saw like I mean, I've been to, I've been deployed. I've launched jets that have come back with no bombs on them. Right. I've contributed to that effort, but like, I've never like been in combat. I've never like, I wasn't in like a horrific car accident, or like nobody held a gun to my head or anything like that. So I was trying to figure out, like, aren't those the things that are supposed to give you PTSD, right? So how do I have PTSD? That doesn't make any sense. Um, and so talking through it, I guess basically, when you have an idea of what reality is, and then something happens that shatters that idea of what reality is, um, some people, it just hits them that way. And that's how it hit me. Was I had a situation where I thought certain people were upholding certain values or doing certain things correctly. And then that illusion kind of got shattered for me. And then my recurring nightmares were me doing something that I felt was morally right, and then having my career impacted by it, or having some kind of negative outcome because I was doing what I felt was right. What I felt was the correct thing to do.
You also did mention, and thank you so much for sharing that. You also did mention that, you are married and you've got a son. And was this just happening, on the work front, or was it also seeping into your private life as well?
Yeah, no, not at all, man. This stuff, it doesn't stay at work when it starts hitting you that hard.
Yeah.
I was putting in, I think, less hours at work while all that was going on. And I feel like I was also putting in less hours at home, because the hours I was at home, I was not the person I wanted to be. I put it in the book, but there was a night I remember I was going through all of this, and I was giving my son a bath, and he was like babbling away, being cute. He was like a year and a half old. And dude, I realized after about 10 minutes that like I hadn't heard a single thing he'd said. I hadn't made eye contact with him. I was just sitting there going through the motions of like, washing his hair and soaping him up and bathing him. But like, I wasn't there with my son. And that was hard.
I can only imagine. But when we started, you did mention you were seeking challenges and things of that nature. And it does seem and look like all of these were challenges that you could surmount. Where was the disconnect now?
Man, that's a good question. I think for me, in that specific situation, um, it was a feeling that the system that I was a part of, that was supposed to, I guess, protect me against things like that, it didn't feel like it was working.
Failed you.
And I think, anyone can get in that situation, right? If you're at work and you get a boss, or you're, in a situation where you feel like the company or whatever it is that you're working for, something happens that's so misaligned with who you are as a person that it turns you off, I guess, to that continuing that pursuit, And in the military, right, I can retire at 20 years. And when I tell you, like, I was at 15 years, really, really close, I'm almost at 15 years. So I was at 14 years. And I was really, really close to just getting out, because I didn't feel aligned anymore with the organization. But I will say, luckily, that's changed. Done 180-degree turnaround on that one, because I got my new base, new leaders, new people that reminded me that one person does not represent this organization.
Absolutely. And what I like about that is, you received somewhat of a pattern break. I mean, you were going through the motions, like you said, prior, and those now manifested as, what you've called them there. There's a time when you then went to leadership school, and an airman that was there literally saw something in you that you hadn't seen in yourself. Could you maybe let us know what was going on there and how it all sort of started to shift things around for you?
Yeah. So when I went to Airman Leadership School, yeah, my instructor, he definitely saw potential in everybody, and he was just what I would define now, knowing what I know, as just an amazing NCO, a non-commissioned officer, just an amazing NCO. He was very good at finding what people were good at and then pulling that out of them. Um, he knew how to change his approach with different people. So, like for me, he would challenge me. For others, he would kind of just give them a look, or whatever it was. With others, he would joke and laugh and be silly, and um, he was good at changing his approach to get that potential out of people. And that really inspired me again to become the best leader I can be. And now I'm a master sergeant. I have about 94 people that work for me. And my absolute favorite part of the day is seeing an airman with potential that maybe he doesn't see in himself, and trying to um, get him to see that, or um, figure out what approach works best for that individual to get them to live up to that potential that I see that they have.
Absolutely. Being seen and being heard is one thing that each and every human being yearns. And, if somebody does that for you, obviously it would give you a different perspective to the kind of person that you are. And it's literally like if they believe in you, you can bore their belief in you until you've built that for yourself. And looking back now, the what's the sort of connection between that moment or that experience to the work that you're now doing to also help others so that they can see, themselves doing more and having more?
So I think that moment in Airman Leadership School, I think there's points in your life where you define everything before it as before this moment, and everything after it as after this moment. I think that Airman Leadership School was one of those moments for me. It was everything was before that moment, and then everything was after that moment. I say after that moment, I put myself 110% into growing myself, and that law of the lid idea of let me make myself as good as I can be so that I can grow others, so I can not do a disservice to the people I lead by having not grown myself or not gained certain skills, because I realized a lot was resting on my shoulders. I probably took on a little too much of that, right? I probably put a little too many rocks in my backpack on that one. But I dove in head first. I spent the next, whatever, 10 years just fully dedicated to growing myself, and I'm still dedicated to that. Along the way, a couple lessons that I learned. There would come points in my journey where I had grown myself, right? And you get to that point where you're like, man, I've learned so much. It's time to go start applying it. And then you stop pursuing the growth and you stop pursuing the learning because you start trying to apply things, and you spiral so fast and just burn out. And I'm just like, man, what happened here? And then I would go back into like, okay, well, I must not have learned enough. I must not have grown enough. And I would go back into my, let's pursue growing. Let's start, listen to podcasts, listen to audiobooks. Let's read more. And it took me a couple iterations of that to realize, though, that when I was doing that, I was a better leader. When I was doing that, it was, I had just read something in a book, and then an airman would have a problem, and I'd be like, bro, I know what to do about this. And I think for me, that was interesting. Like I said, it took me a couple iterations to realize that, but you get to the point where you're like, man, here I am, I've got it, I've arrived or whatever. And then you get humbled real quick because the analogy I always make is you can't pour from an empty cup.
Yeah.
But when you're pouring out into 94 people, the cup empties really fast. So you have to constantly be going through this concerted effort of refilling it. How am I intentionally trying to fill myself up so that I can pour into others?
Oh, absolutely. I quite like that a lot. And, just listening to your story, one thing really stands out to me, Eric. I mean, you just didn't become strong because life got easy after, that leadership course. But, you became strong because you actually decided that whatever pain you were going through should mean something because, you've been there, done that, and now you want to, help others too in the process. And I think that's the invisible lesson here. The struggle wasn't necessarily the end of your story. It was literally creating that story, which is where I now encourage people that are watching this, that no matter what it is that you're going through, you literally should be paying attention because one day you'll have a good story to tell, if you overcome that. So that's pretty amazing. So you literally went from lost to locked in.
I'm still working, right? We're still there, but yes, I would like to think that I'm fairly locked in now. And it's easy for me to say like, no, I'm not going to compromise my values and things like that. And what you just said actually also reminded me of something that I think is important to share, which is when I dedicated myself to growing, I guess I fully dedicated to that, and I spent a decade just trying to grow myself, and that's been like a hobby of mine is read, listen to books, apply new ideas, find new ideas, seek out mentors, get coaching, do some coaching, like all that stuff has been part of my last decade. And I grew. I'm always trying to check myself, right? Because sometimes it's easy to not sound humble. And I try to remain humble as much as I can, but there's a certain point where you have to also acknowledge how far you've grown yourself.
Absolutely.
And I grew myself so far and so fast that I think at a certain point, if you go on a similar journey or whatever, you can end up with superiors that don't understand you because they haven't grown as far as you. And then you can let them, again, because they don't understand you, you're looking to them for approval or whatever. You can start to devalue yourself because you're like, man, they don't get this. Am I an idiot? And the answer is not you're an idiot. The answer might be that they haven't grown as far as you have, and that's okay. There's a little sound clip on YouTube that I used to put on my headphones when I was running to remind me, but it's about I can't do it justice, but it's a little sound clip about a guy who's dying, and he gives his son a watch, and his son's, says, thanks. And he goes, but before I die, like, I want you to know what it's worth. So, take it to a jewelry store, and the jewelry store is like, this is old and scratched. Like, it's not worth anything. And then he's like, well, take it to a pawn shop. And he's like, all right. And he takes it to a pawn shop, and he's like, well, it's old and scratched. Like, it's worth like $50 or whatever. And then he's like, take it to a museum. And he's like, Dad, I get it. Like, I get it. It's the sentimental value. He says, take it to a museum. Just see what they say. He comes back. He's like, Dad, they offered me $350,000 for this because it's a priceless artifact. And he's like, right. So don't let someone else's perception of your value define what you're worth.
I like that because half of the time the leaders that we have ahead of us, like you say, haven't grown themselves. So they're just, using their ego to lead instead of actually, being humble enough to accept that they haven't got it all together, and I like that. I like that a lot.
Yeah.
And I think that also a lot of people would reference that to a bottle of water. A bottle of water at a at a river would be worth less because there's water there, but a bottle of water in a desert will be worth a whole lot more because there's not any other water
Yeah.
inside. And you might think,
Yeah.
as that humble bottle of water at a river, you're worth less just because you just planted in the wrong sort of space. So, yeah, tell us a little bit about the book, from Lost to Locked In.
Yeah.
What's the core message in this book, and what should we be on the lookout for?
Yeah, so here it is. It's From Lost to Locked In, mental fortitude and the fight to lead yourself first. And in it is basically the way I wrote it. A guy helped me kind of come up with this method for writing it. But the way I wrote it is basically it's 12. It's like why I wrote this book and all that stuff. But there's 12 core chapters in it, and they're 12 basically 12 questions that someone would ask me, that I've asked at some point in my life. Things like, why do I keep getting in my own way? Or why do I feel like I'm carrying the weight of the world alone? Um, what does it mean to live with purpose? Things like that. And then over just a couple of pages, really, on each of these is my answer to that. Not saying that's the answer to that. This is my answer to it. This is what I think about this question. And then it kind of goes through how that question has applied in my life. And then a mental shift. So how did that question kind of affect me negatively? A mental shift that I had to kind of rewire how I deal with that now. And then a system that I use in my life that anyone else can use, with actual steps for trying to overcome that. And then each chapter ends with a challenge, to try to get people to kind of a call to action to get them to act and try to make their lives better. And in the back is basically like a workbook where there's blanks, like blank lines and blank pages, and I'm asking people to, this book takes 2.5 hours to read. It's less than 2.5 hours. I did the audiobook. It's like a 2 hour and 5 minute audiobook. But it takes like a month to do it right, to apply these things to your life. And you don't have to apply all of them either. You can just pick the one that's bugging you and try to apply it, right? You probably read that chapter in 3 minutes, but to actually apply it takes time.
Absolutely. And where can people go on the internet to find a copy of this book?
It's on Amazon and on Audible and Apple Books.
Absolutely. I'll definitely.
And Kindle.
All right. I'll make sure that all the links in the show notes will lead to, those properties. Now, Eric, you obviously have been open about, the words PTSD being connected to you, and obviously that being somewhat at that point defining who you were about to become. If you then went on a path and came across this book that you are showing us, Lost to Locked In, would that have made a difference at that particular time?
I think if I found it at the right time, yes. But when I think I was in my darkest point, I don't think I was really that interested in what other people had to say about it, if I'm completely honest. I think I talk about it in the book, actually, but there's a point at which you feel so alone, in a depression or in that state, that you think no one else could ever understand what I'm going through because no one else has been through it. And I would encourage people like that to open their minds to the fact that everyone has gone through something that you haven't been through. And just because they haven't been through the exact situation you have been through, I guess doesn't mean they can't help. But you have to ask for the help. You have to open yourself up to those conversations. and be vulnerable, because that's the hardest part, is being open about what's going on inside your head and inside your heart.
Absolutely. And of all those things that you're mentioning, it just sort of stems to the one core theme that identity is the engine that actually helps people change or who you identify as. Like, you've given us so many different characters. You've given us the Airman, you as the person in England, you as the person in Japan, the dad who was not necessarily there. Now you've presented to us the author who's now also, sending the ladder down for others. I like those army ladders that roll up and then you just send it down. For others to also come back up. And I feel like this is what you're now creating for other people. Can you maybe explain, about identity being the engine of change, and, just in simple terms that somebody could actually understand if they feel stuck right now?
Yeah, absolutely. I think identity, right? I've gone through a couple iterations of kind of like my core values, my mission statement, my vision statement, things like that for my life. And I remember I had another great NCO in my life. He was teaching a class. I ended up at the class, and he challenged us, basically said, what's the Air Force core values? And everyone in the Air Force knows them, right? Integrity first, service before self, excellence in all we do. You can rattle them off immediately. And he's like, sweet, everyone knows them. What are your core values? And everyone went, what? I don't know. And so I remember walking out of his class, and I was a tech sergeant, and I picked up my phone and I called my boss, and I was like, hey man, can I have a week of leave? And he was like, when? I was like next week. And he was like, sure. Why? Is something going on? I was like, not particularly. I just need to do some thinking. And he was like, all right. So I took a week off and procrastinated a lot. I watched a lot of Forged in Fire, that show on TV where they make, knives and stuff. And I did a lot of running. And while I was running, I do a lot of thinking while I'm running. And I was running one day and I was like, man, I really got to nail this stuff down. Like, what is, and then, so I came up with this metaphor for my life where I'm the blade, right? And it's hardened under hammer and anvil, tempered in the heat of the forge, sharpened by steel and honed on the whetstone. I will courageously enter the arena, fiercely wielded by those I choose to serve, protecting them from mediocrity and guiding their way to greatness. That's my mission and vision statement. And that might sound like a bunch of blah, blah, blah to a bunch of people, but it means something to me. And every word that I put in there means something to me. And I know what those things are, and I know why they matter. And I tell people your mission and vision statement, your identity, the things that you choose to make priority in your life, they don't need to make sense to anyone else. But when you say them, when you think about them, they need to mean something to you and remind you what's important. So now when people ask me kind of what's my identity, I don't go through that whole spiel, but I do say I'm a father and husband first, I'm a leader second, and I'm an airman third. So my wife and kid come first, doing the right thing comes second, and then everything else comes third, basically.
Absolutely. And for those that are watching right now, if you're someone who maybe just performs well on the outside, but kind of feels stuck internally, I think Eric's work is not about motivation. It's about really understanding yourself at a deeper level. Like you're saying, have those mission, vision that means something to yourself, and you can actually start building mental fortitude that lasts. So let me ask you, who's watching this right now, have you ever felt maybe successful on paper, but unsettled on the inside? I want you to type the words real talk in the comments if that resonates, and Eric will be checking out those people and maybe helping you out in the process. Now, Now, Eric, I mean, obviously, we started you off at age 17 and you've done all of these things. And somebody might be thinking to themselves, I don't think I'm wired that way. I'm a late bloomer. I started off late in life. Does this actually work on humans? Or maybe you could say, let us know if you've had or seen somebody shift, somebody you've worked with. Maybe you can share with us a moment where something happened for somebody because they went from lost to locked in using your methods.
Yeah, thanks. That's a good question, man. Yeah, definitely. I think I've seen that moment with so many people. Um, but I guess it's not really a moment. With coaching and good leadership and things like that, a lot of things like this happen over time. It's very rare that there's like a moment in time where you watch someone like make that shift, but you see small incremental moments as they go through things. Um, I remember one of my guys, um, he was having trouble with so many things going on in his life. Like I had just met him. I met him, I think it was like 2 days before this. And he came in, he was stressed out. He had like missed an appointment and all these things were going on in his life. And he was so stressed out by them all. And I was like, all right, man, like let's talk through it. Like, what do you got going on? And he started listing things and I started writing them down. And he's like, what are you doing? I was like, I'm making a list so we can tackle all these problems. And he's like, oh, it's like just something foreign. He's like, I've never listed them all out. And I was like, all right, well, let's list them out, man. What you got going on? And he listed all of his problems to me. And I looked down at the paper and I was like, bro, this is 3 things. I was like, this is 3 problems. This is it. That's it. Is it, what else is bugging you? And he was like, it's all this. And I was like, all right, well, shoot, go talk to these people, get this figured out, go over here, buy a new car or whatever it was. And he was like, all right, and he left and like he started making lists. He started writing stuff down and became, less overwhelmed like overnight. I guess that's a good moment I can pick. And then the same dude came to me a little bit later because he was having trouble with some not trouble with finances, but he was trying to afford some things. And I'm good at budgeting and I'm also a financial coach. And he was like, hey, can you help me build a budget? I was like, sure, dude. Like, let's sit down. Let's build a budget. So we took his paycheck and I had him list out all his expenses and everything that he knows he spends money on, Netflix, subscriptions, gas, all those things. We listed all those things out and I did some math and I said, sweet, dude. Like, you're trying to buy this motorcycle. What does the motorcycle cost? Like $4,000? Yeah, you should have that in, 5 months, man. You've got, $800 extra a month. And he said, I don't have $800 extra a month. I said, yeah, you do.
Yeah, you do.
I said, look at them. Like, what did we forget to list? And he looks at it and he goes, looks at me and he's like, man, this isn't right. Like, I definitely don't have $800 a month left. And I was like, Family Mart, which is basically a gas station food. I was like, Family Mart's pretty expensive, bro. And he was like, oh my God, I am spending so much money on stuff I don't need. What am I doing? And I was like, I don't know, man. You got to figure out how much do you want the motorcycle, And then he was in a class, and 2 days later, his classmates were in. He and his classmates were in the building, and 2 of them were in the computer room, and he had wandered off to do something else. And I heard them talking, and one of them goes, "Hey, man, you want to go to sushi for lunch?" And the other one's like, "Yeah, man. Should we invite him?" And the other one goes, "Nah, dude, he's lame. He's like budgeting or something. He doesn't want to go out." And I was just like, yes, good job. Like, that's awesome. I was excited. It's fun to watch like someone like that because he's growing, he's doing great now and everything. But just small moments, and then you compound those over time and that dude's life could change.
Oh, absolutely. And you know what I like about this, Eric, is you're literally giving people their lives back. Because if somebody could not see what was happening to them and how it's affecting them, they could keep going and going without actually making any resolutions to that. Because, as you know, fish don't see the water that they swim in, and neither can we see the air that we
Yes.
breathe. So it takes somebody to create that sort of pattern break that you would have done for them, and then hopefully they now can see the forest for the trees that it actually has. And yeah, I mean, I feel like we could go on and keep talking about all of these things,
I
but
could talk about this all day.
but Eric, now that you've brought us into your world, what's next? What can we anticipate and obviously be on the lookout for that you're working on, or that we can just celebrate with you later on down the track?
Yeah, so just got restationed. Been here about 3 months now in the States. Getting settled in here, that's a big thing. Getting my feet under me, getting, I guess, up to speed with the current work environment, because every time you change, it's new people, new challenges, new things like that. But as I'm going through that, going to be trying to do some more coaching. I do most of my coaching over Zoom like this with people. That tends to work the best. So trying to scale my website and scale up the coaching practice. That's definitely something I'm trying to do. And then one of my buddies has kind of planted a little seed for a second book. I don't know if I'll write that right away, but sort of one geared, I think, a little bit towards fatherhood. But my son is not even 3 yet, so I might be struggling with some imposter syndrome on that one. I don't know if I'm ready to write a book about fatherhood when I've only been in it for 2.5 years. But yeah, so a couple things coming there. And then, but I'm still in the military for another probably 5 years or so, maybe more. We'll see. So I think I told you before we started recording, but that gives me also a unique opportunity to kind of let this scale organically, because I'm not, I guess, frantic for clients. I have a steady income and good benefits and things like that. And so hopefully this can just scale organically and help some people out. Because for me, it's really not about the money. It's about helping people.
Absolutely. Now, Eric, I can't thank you enough for spending this time with me today. I mean, your life story and your experience have got so much value, and I dare you, write that book, because you already are 2 years experienced, and then it could actually be a periodic update. You know what I mean? These days, books are not necessarily set in stone. You could actually just write whatever it is that you've experienced now. You could literally start it off from the time you were not present and what you did and all of those things, that you've now done to revive yourself. That alone could literally fill up, 12 chapters of who you're becoming and things of that nature. And it can now just be a document of you literally documenting the growth of your son. And if there's going to be any other kids, why not?
Yeah, I like that. And I like that you dared me, because that means I got to do it, right? You threw down the gauntlet. You did the challenge thing.
Yeah, well, there you go. Now that means we're going to have to expect you on the Online Prosperity Show, because you've got another book that we need to be talking about. So yeah, thank you so much for your time today.
Yeah, thanks for having me, Prosper.
No worries. I mean, obviously you shared your story with such honesty. So many people would have just tried to make themselves look good, and it's conversations like this that just remind us that strength isn't about never struggling. It's actually paying attention to those struggles so that you can actually be the one that then roadmaps for others. And it's about choosing not to stay stuck. So congratulations on what you have done. And now we can't wait for this fatherhood book.
Thanks, Prosper.
Great stuff. And for everybody that's watching or listening, thank you so much for having come this far. And I'm hoping this episode has actually helped you. If you want to share it with one person who might be silently caring more than they should, definitely go ahead. And if somebody has shared this with you, the next time you see them, just give them a big hug, because they're seeing something in you that you might not have seen yourself. And while you're at it, please subscribe to the Online Prosperity Show, because I've just been told in the next episode, we're going to be talking about ideas that can help you build a happier, more meaningful existence. So be sure to subscribe so you do not miss this out. And Eric has been talking about himself being challenged and how he responds to things. Here's my challenge to you. Don't just consume inspiration. You need to act on it. So if something in Eric's story sort of spoke to you today, just take one small step towards becoming the person you know you could be. And I can't wait to see what you do with this information. In the meantime, bye for now.